Corporation board meeting for December 17th, 2014. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would, please. Mick, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comment? Do we have anybody that would like to address the board at this juncture? Okay, seeing none. Approval of minutes. So we have a couple of sets of minutes to approve. First would be the November 19th regular board meeting minutes.
Move to approve the November 19th, 2014 board minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the November 19th, 2014 board meeting minutes. Any corrections, comments, or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we have minutes for the December 2nd, 2014 joint meeting with the City Council.
I move we approve the 2014 Lcdc City Council workshop minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve those December 2nd special workshop minutes with the City Council. Any corrections, comments, or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that takes us right into committee reports. We have quite a bit on finance tonight, so Rod, you can start it off here.
Yep. Let's go ahead and get started, if you would. I'll start with the balance sheet of the Lake District first. And for the Lake District this last month, we did have a decrease in cash of $95,971. Primarily due to us cutting a check concerning the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad earnest money check. In the area of receivables this month, we do have the receivables of taxes per the audit from the county. That's $256,346. And then an unusual item this month is a item you'll see on the balance sheet due from the River District, $28,958. This is an audit item that's been there for a few years, and what it is, it's related to a past internal district payroll cost share situation where we share the costs for several years, and we're going to fix this receivable and the payment by issuing a check from the River District in the amount of that $28,958, and that'll be payable to the Lake District. So that'll clean up that accounting. It doesn't change our total numbers. We just need to move the money around. Other assets, if you go down a little bit further, you'll see the Burlington Northern earnest money listed at $72,819. And then we have the Washington Trust bond interest of, it's a small amount, that is the $137. So a little bit of activity during the month for sure, but not a whole lot of changes as far as the total numbers go. If you go to liabilities next, you'll see that we have an accrued interest payable. That's $44,138. That's a new line item, and what that relates to is an audit adjustment pertaining to the Washington Trust Bank Lake District bond. Our mortgages and payables are listed, and all other assets and liabilities. So with that, I'd like to go to the profit and loss statement. If you turn to the next page, you can see on the profit and loss statement, we did receive tax increment revenue from the county in November of $42,361. We had rent income of $11,850, interest income $138, and then our tenant security deposit $1,120 for a total revenue of $55,469. Go down to the expenses for the month, you'll see our professional fees are a little bit higher than they normally would be, and that is because we paid $7,870 to Range Northwest for the Robinson Research Community Survey, and Dave will be talking about that more later, but that was an expense. Everything else for the month on the profit and loss stayed about the same as it would be normal months. There's nothing unique or unusual in the expenses beyond the ones I mentioned. If we could go to the River District next, and the River District, of course, typically doesn't have as much going on. We did have a decrease in the cash on the balance sheet of $60,009, and that's primarily also due to the earnest money check that we cut to Burlington Northern. We have a receivable of taxes of $121,953. That's per an audit, and that's the value that we get from the county. You go down a little bit further, you'll see the check deposit for Burlington Northern, and you'll see that item of $75,554. No other significant changes on the asset side for the month. You go to liabilities, and you'll see that we have this due to Lcdc, that $28,958 that I spoke about is paying to the Lake District. The River District owes that money, and we're going to cut a check to clean that up. Everything else stayed about the same. Are there any questions about the balance sheet or the profit loss for either district? If not, we will go to the payables, and I believe Tony has passed out or is passing out the current sheets. If you look at the payables for this month, we have a bill with Elam and Burke for $148.45. All in Troxel, we have a total bill of $3,614.72, and a large portion of that is their work for us on the railroad acquisition that we're working on. It was $2,620.72. Molitor and Associates, our government relations bill that we had for November, $1,877.91. And then, which was approved last time we met, the North Idaho Family Group paying half of our total commitment of $15,000, so we're paying $7,500. If you look at all of our payables for the month, $13,141.08, and I do need your approval on the payables and also your approval to accept the financials.
I move that we approve the payables and the financials for November for both districts.
Second.
Moved and second to approve the payables and financials. Any questions or comments?
Okay.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. The next item you'll see on your agenda is our fiscal year 2014 audit, which is performed by Magnus & McHugh. We have Scott Hoover here today to go over our audit. We did go over the audit in the Finance Committee, asked a lot of questions, had him explain several things. We've asked him to come to this meeting and give you an update. Scott, welcome.
Right there, be fine, Scott. Thank you very much.
Scott? Yep.
Welcome.
Board, Tony. As Mr. Caldwell mentioned, we did go over the audit last week in a little bit greater detail, so I'll be brief and just touch on the audit reports and a little bit of get into a little bit of the procedures that we performed, some of the areas of focus in the audit that we had this year, and leave it at that unless you guys have any further questions. So if you could turn to page 1. You'll find the main audit report. As you see here, independent auditor's report. I always like to emphasize that we adhere to our independence in fact and appearance. So if we don't have our independence, our audit opinion means nothing. So I'd like to highlight on page 1 there the second bold paragraph here, management's responsibility for the financial statements. I'll just, the paragraph, I couldn't say it better myself, so I'll just read it here. It's management's responsibility of Lcdc to prepare financial statements that are fairly presented and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And this also includes responsibility for the design and implementation and maintenance of a system of internal controls. It's their responsibility to prepare financial statements that are free of material misstatement, whether caused due to error or fraud. Sometimes people think that's the auditor's responsibility, so I just always like to highlight that. And then our responsibility as auditors is to plan and perform our audit in accordance with professional standards that we adhere to, and to gather enough evidence to be able to form an opinion that the financial statements are free of a material misstatement. And so on page 2, at the bottom of page 1, you'll see the opinion paragraph, and I'll just say we have a clean audit opinion. It's called an unqualified opinion, as expected, as usual. So, any questions on the audit report? And this report here, this first report, is really on the numbers and the disclosures and the footnotes of the financial statements. I'll get to the second report, which is the, we call it a yellow book report, which is required in governmental audits, and that talks about the internal controls. But before we go to that second report, I'd like to, if you could please turn to page 10. Like I said, we kind of got into the numbers quite a bit last week at the Finance Committee meeting, but I did want to just, for those that weren't there, this is the statement of net position. That's government lingo for the balance sheet, government-wide balance sheet. And I'd just like to kind of highlight some of the areas of focus briefly that we looked at. If you look at this balance sheet here, you'll see total assets of about $12.9 million, of which $6.2 million is cash and cash equivalents, and there's another amount of cash is in the restricted cash bond reserve. So the majority of the balance sheet is cash, and so we test. I'd just like to say a little bit of what we do for some of these larger balance sheet areas. We get the bank reconciliations. We get the original bank statements. We don't confirm cash. Some firms do, but we basically get comfortable that cash is adequate, fairly presented. We also capital assets. You have land, about $2.9 million, and then the remaining buildings and depreciable assets of net of accumulated depreciation of $1.6 million. And again, there wasn't a lot of activity in those accounts this year. There was just some depreciation expense, so we really just we've audited those balances in the past. So there we have, and as well as Mr. Caldwell mentioned, we also audit the taxes receivable from the county. So there, in a nutshell, there we've gotten coverage on most of the assets there. And then the other main area we looked at, if you look at the liabilities, is debt. And so you have, as you all know, we have a number of debt instruments out there, loans payable, and so we do send loan confirmations to the different banks, and we tie down those balances. Usually there's some small timing differences between the amounts they confirm back and the amounts on your trial balance, but those amounts are properly stated. We also get comfortable, perform reasonableness tests, recalculate interest expense to get comfortable with that as well. So just wanted to touch on that briefly. And then if there are no questions on that, if you could turn to the last page, or actually page way in the back of the report, you will see on page 34, this is the other Yellow Book report. It's called the Report on Internal Controls over Financial Reporting and on Compliance and Other Matters Based on an Audit of Financial Statements Performed in Accordance with Governmental Auditing Standards. That's a mouthful. But in a nutshell, what this report means is as we go in and plan and perform our audit, we're required to gather and update our understanding each year of the key internal control processes, review of invoices, et cetera, bank reconciliations being performed timely. And so as we do this, we do that to gain an understanding and assign risk to the different financial statement areas so that we can plan our procedures accordingly. And so this report says governmental auditing standards require us that if during that process of gaining an understanding of the internal controls, we come across any, their wording is a deficiency in internal controls, anything that rises to the scope, the level of a significant deficiency or a material weakness in internal controls, that we have to bring it to your attention in this report. We also call it a finding. And so this is another clean report, if you will. They're happy to say that we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls. So that's, again, it's good. As good as you can get. So, we did update our understanding and looked at the controls. And as I mentioned in the Finance Committee meeting, everything was very good. So no recommendations for improvement there. Questions?
Questions of Scott?
We did question him down pretty good during the Finance Committee meeting, so I think he's been grilled well.
Okay, well, Scott, we appreciate your work, and welcome to the fold here. I know this is your first year as the auditor assigned to us, so we appreciate the work you put into it. If we don't have any other questions, I guess you're free to go.
Pleasure working with you as well, and working with you, especially Tony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Chair would entertain a motion to accept the audit for the financial statements as of September 30th, 2014.
Motion to accept the financial statements as of September 30th, 2014.
The audit. Yep. Second. Did you second it, Mick? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I didn't hear everybody. Let's say that again. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I got it now. Any opposed? I heard Dave. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Looks like all for you, Rod, huh?
Yes, that is.
So that takes us to the Housing Committee. Commissioner Goodlander.
Yes, at the present time, there are no updates from the IHFA in Boise, so we are just moving along.
Okay.
Basically, no report, sir.
All right. Thank you for that. Commissioner Jordan's not here. Tony, do you know if there's anything to report on the Parking Committee front?
I do not have anything to report on the parking committee front.
Well, takes us to communications. Dave.
Welcome.
Here we are all of a sudden.
Greetings, we're here. This evening, I'd like to invite both Bill Robinson from Robinson Research and also Adam Graves from the Range to join us at the table. And I'll ask Bill to go over the research findings, and then after that, Adam will ask you to kind of interpolate for us a little bit what may be recommendations and a track we may consider to implement some of the recommendations and the findings that we've discovered as part of Bill's research. So welcome, gentlemen. Bill,
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you much. Well, let's see here. We did telephone surveys between September 3rd and October 7th. It's a 600 sample survey, split four ways, 150. We split Coeur d'Alene three ways using 95 and I-90 as dividing lines, and then 1/4 of the sampling was outside the city limits, proportionate to population. 600 sample survey is good to about plus or minus 4% for margin of sampling error. And there's oceans of detail on this if any of you want. We can drill down endlessly. It's all built into the price. For today, I'm just going to give you an overview of the highlights. But if there's any more depth you want, if you just get a hold of Adam, call. There's nothing we can't find in it for you. The greater familiarity, they claimed, the more intense their opinions were of the agency. The Kroc Center and the building we're in appear to be very well-liked projects, yet they were not often mentioned when we asked for a description of Lcdc. Like, hey, what do they do? What have they done? So we've got a little gap there in your image. I'll button that up later. The favorability score was 2.9 on a 1 to 5 scale. 3 is the midpoint on a 1 to 5 scale. Tiny bit below the midpoint of the scale, but half said that they would vote in favor strongly or somewhat of Coeur d'Alene continuing its relationship with Lcdc. It appears that the term urban renewal could be problematic, a problematic way of phasing the types of projects that you promote. Community projects elicited more responses, better responses. We played with those two. We asked about, hey, aware of any urban renewal projects? Are you aware of any community projects? And they came forth with all kinds of things when we talked about community projects. We talked about urban renewal. People think of the projects. They think of things, well, that might be okay for some big city, but not around here or something. And so urban renewal was definitely a stumbling block, where community projects was not. McEwen Park was not rated as highly as the above two projects, but was mentioned far more often in the comments, that's something that's more recently in people's minds, and they had a bit to say about that. 3 and 5 named McEwen Park as an urban renewal or community project. Respondents were more than twice as likely to report being able to think of a community project than an urban renewal project. 1 in 9 demonstrated unaided awareness of Lcdc. That's we never came and said, hey, have you ever heard of them? But we beat around the bush to say, well, have you known any that do this or that? And so we had 1 in 9 people came up with your name off the cuff. 1 in 4 reported some kind of awareness. That includes the ones that named you without us prompting. The unaided plus, have you ever heard of them? 1 in 4 reported awareness. 2 and 3 had said they had never heard of LCDC. 1 in 4 cited increased taxes as a downside of urban renewal. Half reported being somewhat or very familiar with LCDC. Of those who knew of your existence, they said, well, how familiar are you? Of those who knew of your existence at all, half were at least somewhat or very familiar. We had a couple of other categories of less familiarity. 3 and 10 were unwilling or unable to rate how favorably they viewed your organization. 1 in 4 rated it above the midpoint of the scale, the same portion that rated it at the midpoint or below the midpoint. 3 and 10 reported they were aware that LCDC provides funds to the City of Coeur d'Alene's Art Commission. A majority of respondents reported being strongly or somewhat in support of using public funds for public art. When they were asked to rate a series of projects and how beneficial they had been to this area, the Kroc Center and the new downtown library were ranked in the top 2 spots. Riverview Tower and McEwen Park were ranked in the lowest 2 spots. Riverview Tower received the lowest mean score by a wide margin. 1 in 20 demonstrated unaided awareness of tax increment financing. When we said, well, how do they finance this? How is it funded? Blah, blah, blah. So we had, 5 people out of 100 or 30 out of 600 mentioned tax increment financing or something very close. 1 in 3 rated tax increment financing above the midpoint of the scale. So 2 and 3 were either at or below the midpoint of the scale. Nearly half reported that they would vote somewhat or strongly for the city continuing its relationship with LCDC. I remember that number. It was 49% compared to 1 in 3 who would vote against. So the rest were kind of on the bubble. So you have some cushion of favorability there. Basically 49 for and then 49% for and 33% against, with the rest of them just kind of unsure. That came downstream of a description, so we threw everyone into that. They didn't have to have prior awareness, so we asked them that. I think it boils down to about 4 bullets. They love what you've done. They don't know much about your organization. Very few understand tax increment financing. And in your name, Lake City resonates a lot better than does Development Corporation. So I was just sort of amusing myself on the way driving here. I was thinking, you might be able to sell that Development Corporation term. Some of you were doing a Christmas movie and they needed a villain or something. Development Corporation, along with any other name, might resonate in that way. But it definitely isn't the best part of your name. Any questions?
I have a question. Do you think that when you ask Riverview Tower, the name Riverview Tower, that people mistakenly thought it was Parkview Tower that's overlooking McEwen Park as opposed to Riverview Tower, which is, I believe, down in Riverstone?
I just don't know. I mean, there was nothing, it wasn't a can you describe it or something where they could give us a description to where we could see if they misidentified it.
I assume it was put in the mix as a sort of a test because it's not a project in which we were involved.
Yes. It was just thrown in there as a control piece. And so it's good to have something like that in there that's not part of the mix, just to have something to gauge against. And that at the time we thought was probably the best known and most obvious thing to throw in.
Other questions of Bill?
I've got one. Bill, it says that 1 in 4 respondents reported having heard the term tax increment finance, and so you got 75% had never heard of that term, correct?
Give me just a second.
Yes.
There was 1 in 20 mentioned it before we threw it out in front of them, and then the number you quoted is those that said yes, they had heard of it. So yeah.
Okay. And then So that tells me from an educational perspective or an awareness perspective, we haven't done a very good job in explaining the vehicle by which we exist. Now, the awareness of who we are, what was the number you said of people that had not even, weren't aware of the term LCDC? Of the 600 people you contacted,
Give me just a second here.
109.
you had 11% that had heard of us, 89% that had never heard of us.
Unaided, 1 in 9, 11% demonstrated unaided awareness. Means they mentioned it to us,
Yeah.
before we mentioned it to them.
Okay.
1 in 4 said yes, they were aware, and 2/3 said no, never heard of it. There's nothing like that around here.
So we got 66 or 67% have never heard of us, of the 600 people you. And tell us a little bit about your sample. Tell us how you cast the net to determine who you would call, so we get a good feel for the sample that you actually contacted. Tell us how the science that went into that.
There are companies that sell scientific telephone samples. In fact, one of them is called that. There's several in the U.S. that sell lists of numbers that they know to be good, that are random, that are not necessarily in the phone book, and they aren't all landline numbers either. It's a mix of cell phone numbers and whatever. People are concerned about cell phones, but as people sign up to vote, sign up for utilities and such, a lot of them give the cell phone number as the number they sign up with, and so cell phone numbers have entered that kind of sample a lot more than we had previously thought. We made 5 attempts over the course of a few days. If we got just an answering machine, we didn't leave messages on answering machines. If the qualified respondent was not available, or we got a busy signal or whatever, anything other than yes, I'll take the survey, no, I won't, we hammered away over the course of 5 days at different times a day so that we'd burn through as little sample as possible. You notice it took a month in the field. If we run that through real quickly, we get an older, poorer, more sedentary, less educated slice of the population. That when you see a survey that's been done in the last 48 hours, you know that they've sort of incubated their eggs in a microwave. And so those are called dialing protocols. Like if we're doing something for CDC, Centers for Disease Control, that's how we do it, and that's how we did this one. And then it was split into fourths. We just split the city into thirds, and the outside the city was its own fourth.
So you knew off the list that you had where these people geographically were located?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't rely on them to tell us. We verified it. But most people don't know points of the compass. When I say, are you north or south of I-90? That's a tall question for a lot of people.
Okay.
So we might ask to verify, because sometimes people have their numbers forwarded, and the prefixes. They might actually have moved but kept an old prefix, so we verify it. But for most part, we've got them pinpointed, and we don't rely on their ability to identify map coordinates or anything.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions for Bill before we engage Adam?
Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Graves, based upon the knowledge that we now have,
Yeah,
enlighten
thanks.
us. What's your recommendations or what we might?
After looking at, the public perceptions and awareness study done by Mr. Robinson, we suggest the LCDC Communication Committee look into a public outreach program. This should include consideration for modifying the name of the organization to reflect more of what the organization is and does for the community. Updating not just the name but the image as far as what we call in the business is touch points. So it could include your logo, your website, the signage that are on your job sites, particularly how are the signs done, retooling of the public information to better convey the goals and accomplishments you guys have done. So looking at all of the copy and content that's used as far as your website or any kind of collateral material, what are you saying in them, and are you talking over their head as far as tax increment financing and using words like urban renewal instead of community projects. So really retooling the message of what you guys do and who you are down to a better, more understandable level for the community to kind of be engaged and form a relationship with you. Whereas now you're some form of a tax increment thingamajig corporation somewhere that they might have heard of. So positioning you guys a little bit better as far as a community partner. Right now there's just a big disconnect between the general public and the LCDC that we think can be easily addressed. And again, position you guys as what you are, a community partner and less of a giant corporation that's out there operating, kind of in the shadows, so to speak. So that would be our suggestion is look into that.
Okay, so we build a bridge over a freeway to heighten our awareness in the community with traffic delays and that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not poking any fun at our neighbors to the west, but that certainly is probably ratcheting up the awareness of that agency over in the city of Post Falls. So I'm still focused on this. 2/3 of the population doesn't have a clue about what we do, and I don't know if that's population-wise kind of rings true with everything involved that has to do with government or things they aren't directly being involved with. But I guess the third that are aware of us, whatever methods we've been using up to this point to reach out and to make aware or to make available what we are, what we do, we need to somehow focus or engage other methods to do that. And I think that's kind of what you're talking a little bit about. And I don't know if, we've done things obviously with websites and web buttons on blogs and newsletters and, being actually those sorts of things, news releases or press releases. I guess, do you have any vision or any idea what other media that we haven't tapped that we might incorporate some of these recommendations into?
Sure. From looking at what you guys have done, you are more of a responding to information. So you've set up a website where people who might have heard of you through the press or something can go to you and find out more information about you. But you've typically not done any outward reach to the general public as far as letting them know that you're a part of XYZ project. I think the furthest I've seen you guys go is maybe job site signs, on the construction fence. But that only goes so far and only reaches, the people who actually walk up to the job site and have an interest to look at the sign. So there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that the general population knows you exist and knows what you do on a regular basis, and keeping them aware of what's coming or what you have done. But traditionally, the people who know about LCDC, as the research shows, there's a limited number of people who know about LCDC, and those people have very strong opinions on the LCDC. So those are the people who they're very involved in, probably politics and taxing and everything else. But the vast majority of the people, as you saw, they don't get into that stuff. They're dropping kids off to school and they've got a business to run and they're doing this and they're doing that, and they might have heard of you, but they have no idea what you do. And those are the people that would be good to let them know that you're a community organization and really kind of, tout what you guys do for the community as a whole. As far as mediums, back to your question, there's a lot of different mediums out there. Different price ranges for different mediums and how long you use the different mediums. And that kind of comes back to the LCDC Communications Committee, and we could formulate some plans of what is that and who are those people and how do we get in front of them the most cost-efficient way and tell your story. and tell your story in a way that connects to them, not delve into the numbers of how tax increment financing works and et cetera, et cetera. If they want that information, you have that repository on your website where they can dig in and understand it more. But the goal should probably be backing up a little bit and just giving them the 30,000-foot level of who are you and what do you do for the community as a whole.
Yeah, I think, Dave, with your committee, certainly that is the challenge for us. We've been on this board for a number of years, several. Well, we understand tax increment financing, but it's not an easy concept to get. The first year you're on the board, first 6 months to understand it. So that part's not easy. Interesting about the name. I can see what the survey said about the name, and maybe changing how we talk about things, because urban renewal, you think of a big city and big projects sometimes. So I think those are helpful. I think we have to ask how we can do it better. I also recognize that no matter what we do, there's a large part of the population, as you said, has got other things to do. It's no different than people running for office, and the turnout is so low, and they don't even know who's in certain offices because that's not something they deal with every day. So I think we can do better. I don't think we'll ever be where we want, because it's a little bit tough to explain, but maybe it's even tougher to have people engaged, and that's where your committee can help us. I like listening to this. I mean, because we do it every day, we think everybody's engaged. Well, they're not. And if we weren't on this committee doing this, we'd have to ask ourselves, how much would we be engaged? And if we're in politics and other volunteer events, volunteer organizations, we probably understand it. But if we're not, it doesn't affect our life that much. So it's interesting trying to prove that communication.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, I think since I looked over the data, I think you're exactly right. The other thing that I've thought about, is as a general citizen that's here in Coeur d'Alene, if you don't live inside one of our development areas, why would you be paying attention to it? So I think that's our challenge. So when we take Adams, our data that's coming in, if you're not downtown in the core or in somewhere where we have impact and can influence, and it does make a difference.
Sure.
I can see exactly why the data looks like it does from a statistical standpoint. So it'd be interesting to do an overlay just within our boundaries, pull those people and see how we sit. So,
Sure.
I know.
They can probably pull that demographic, that drill down, do the cross-tabbing and pull that out for us.
yeah, I think it'd be an interesting comparison.
The one thing I don't think we do a very good job of is showing our involvement in certain projects. I mean, a great example is the Burlington Northern project that we're going to talk about later tonight. We're going to have a significant stake in that. It's going to be a great benefit to the community. It's going to open up, trails and waterfront and so on and so forth. But oftentimes we're very quiet about our involvement. It's almost like we're in the back and the city's taking the lead on this, and we don't get credit for some of the things that we do. I've been on the board now a little over a year, and I think of some of the projects that we've been involved with that before I got on the board, I mean, you were kind of, I think Lcdc is somewhat involved with that, but I'm not sure how. And I think that's a way that you could go to the people that aren't in the district and start to say, this is how we impact this community. I mean, all the trails we've helped implement, the parks, you look at Riverstone and all the different places that, we have our fingerprints on. We sometimes just are kind of in the background and not really involved in touting our involvement in that.
We aren't undertaking this certainly as a beauty contest. This is from an educational perspective, and the fact we're dealing with some major tax money here, and we want part of our mission has to be to encourage people to understand where their dollars are being spent. And I can think of a development issue in my own particular neighborhood that I got intimately involved with, ended up in the Supreme Court of the state. But if it hadn't happened, not in my backyard type of deal, I probably wouldn't given a pause to that. And that's a lot of what goes on with what we do, and it's reflective of the survey results, like you all have alluded to. If it isn't something that's jumping up in front of you and bothering you or reaching for your back wallet, that you're somewhat reserved about getting fully engaged in it. That's just the busyness of what we deal. But I think the shocking part I see is the fact of the tremendous amount of people that I think most people should be aware of what we do, strictly because of the dollars involved, but also the controversy that's been out there. I mean, we've been through probably one particular media, the printed media medium, we've been above the fold many times in the past 5 years, and most of that stuff is not positive. And so I think it's very important that people, I guess, hear the other side, which is what we're trying to talk about here, and educate people as to the nuts and bolts of what we do, and also encourage that part of it for them to participate and let us know, so that we get feedback from folks that are not involved with things other than in their own backyard. So that's kind of our thruster. Any other comments or questions for Adam, Deanna?
I think that one of our flaws has been we're very technical in what we do, and this board as a whole is pretty technical in our processes, and so we're just doing our job and following the law and doing what we see, and we forget sometimes how important the public is to what we do, and showing them the value to the public for what we're using their tax dollars for. And I think that we do need to move forward with processes to change our image. I very much like the idea of working with Range. I think that they can give us some good guidance and move us in the right direction. And I think we need to invest our time and energy in this. There's potential down the road. People keep talking about East Sherman, different things like that. This Lake District is going to sunset in, 9 years?
2021.
2021.
7.
7 years.
Coming up on 7.
So there's a lot of information that I think we need to present to the public in a way that they understand it and they can follow what we're doing, and hopefully we can provide them with a reason why we are important to the community and why the things we have done have value, such as trails. The Prairie Trail wouldn't exist without us. But how many people know that? So I think we've been remiss in not getting that information out. And so that would be my thoughts, is we need to move forward with Range and get started on the process.
Okay. All right. Well, I think communication from we'll march ahead with this, with Adam's organization, and formulate some timelines and breakdown of the tact and the process we're going to use, and how we're going to deploy these particular tools that we decide upon to help get this message out and educate people. So just want to give you an update as to what we have been contemplating and the data that we've gathered and where we're going to go from here. So any other comments or ideas on that?
Do we need a motion to accept this proposal, or?
I don't think so. We haven't really formulated anything concrete yet, Nick. We'll probably do that as part of our next month meeting. So, okay. Well, thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
The only other thing from communications perspective that's kind of along the same line, our video that we did produce last year, last month, we agreed to tweak that a little bit, make it a little more current, get some of the aging out of it. That is, Range has arranged the personalities, the voices that are going to be utilized and put into the update of this, and I believe that will commence after about the 7th or 8th of January. Yeah. So they'll be working on that this upcoming month also. So
Good.
That's all I got, Mr. Chair.
There's some retailers involved in that are kind of busy right now.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, thank you for that. That's good information to consider. So the next would be Jobs Committee. Mick, anything to update us on
No
there?
report this month.
Okay.
Hopefully next month we might.
Yeah, we should have a report on progress on the joint use facility at the higher education campus, hopefully. Executive Director's Report, Tony.
Just a couple items. The first one is the environmental supplement. Change that. to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Real Estate Purchase and Sale Agreement. I sent you some information on this, but for the audience, I'll kind of just read what's going on here. The purchase and sale agreement that was recently approved by Burlington Northern Santa Fe, the city, and Lcdc stated that Burlington Northern would conduct soil sampling on the sale property and provide the results to the city and Lcdc. This sampling has been completed, and the Lcdc and the city have received the reports. And the supplement that the railroad is asking that we sign basically says that we've received the sampling, the results, we've looked at it, and that we understand that it is a sample and not a conclusive survey of the entire right-of-way, as samples are, and that we understand that, and we are good to go forward with closing on or signage of the PSA, the purchase and sale agreement. There have been a couple issues identified in the report, mainly dealing with some heavy metals that are somewhat typical of railways, and the city, Mike Ridley, is looking to engage another third-party technical person to take this survey that they received and go out there and walk the tracks and really work with the city and LCDC to see if we should have any concerns of what the sample found. There's always, with the Prairie Trail and the Union Pacific, back then I recall we did have an issue in the sampling with some arsenic levels. And we found out that this part of northern Idaho and the inland Northwest has a high background level of arsenic that is native to the soil. So these type of things need to be further vetted to make sure that we understand exactly if there are any issues in the property that we are buying. So that would be happening in the next few weeks. And along with the supplement, the closing has been postponed until March 5th. It has been extended. So the railroad has an interesting signing program when they sign documents, which pushes things out. So we have until March 5th to close on this deal. And within that time, if we learn anything more about this sample, that we have any major concerns, we can always back out of this acquisition. Any questions? Yeah.
Tony, the follow-up, walking the right-of-way by, I'd assume it's some sort of an environmental engineering firm. The city is, are we going to be asked to participate in the cost of that, prorated based upon?
I'm not sure.
Our okay.
Not
so
sure. I've talked to Mr. Ridley today. He's looking at some local talent to do that for us, and we'll probably chat about that.
Okay. You know, this report that we got, I mean, they took, 12 samples, I think, along that entire corridor. And I know, and Danielle, this might be a question for you. The railroad's position now is they want to sell what I'd call the western, is it 1,200 feet, 1,100 feet, 1,500 feet out by Hutter to us, but yet have the perpetual easement to continue to have track there and use that for their turnaround. This report kind of establishes a baseline. If they pollute that at some point in the future, is there anything addressed in that purchase agreement or that access agreement that refers to them damaging the grounds by this continued activity and whatever they park there or what comes off their trains, or we just have to let them do it and suffer whatever way it goes?
We don't have a draft of that easement agreement yet. I know Gridley is awaiting receiving their draft, their form easement, but probably the short answer is that they're not going to provide us any kind of indemnification. That doesn't seem to be something that they're at all interested or willing to do. So we probably would be at risk for their use of the property. We can certainly try and request that, and you guys will have an opportunity to, review the easement before we execute it. That'll be part of the closing, but I wouldn't be hopeful on that front, I guess.
One of the strategies that we are thinking of doing, and this will kind of solidify over the next few weeks, is that we would be buying that easement area. LCDC would be buying the property for that easement area, but at closing, we could simultaneously go ahead and gift that to the city so that this easement area and that real estate property would be city-owned, and that the city could work closely with the railroad on any of those issues and not LCDC.
Danielle, is that an insurable risk that we could find some way to cover ourselves or the city?
I don't think so. I don't know if Danny has any other insight.
I would be surprised if it were. It might be at some great cost, but typically it's tough to get. Now, there's typically storing, if they do use it, it's probably going to be empty vessels for the most part because they're moving cargo and freight. So what they need storage for is empty.
Well, and there isn't
cars.
any, my understanding is that there isn't anything on the line that is toxic or, it's mostly goods and not hauling a lot of waste or that kind of thing. Isn't that right, Tony?
It's not oil coming through the area.
No, they're just servicing their customers to the west of us, and I think that's the
Mills.
mills there, plywood mill and
Coal?
coal. I don't believe so. That's never.
We
been
could ask
brought
for that
up.
information, though.
Yeah,
we
we-
could see who is on the line.
There's
In
no
that area.
coal, no reason for coal to be on that line.
I know the rationale from the railroad's perspective of requiring this continued use is for both existing customer and potential future customers. So there may be hazardous to the environment activity down the road that hasn't occurred yet, but that wouldn't preclude them from supporting that at some point because of this agreement.
That's why we're thinking strategically that maybe the best thing to do is for LCDC just to give that property to the city and let the city deal with that long-term neighbor that they have, because that's.
And that's right in the neighborhood out there too. Right. So, okay.
But then even if we give the property to the city, we still can help fund the trail because it's still within the river district. We can help with public improvements, but we wouldn't own the property in fee simple. Maybe let the city have that
But that,
ownership.
the results of this particular study, this environmental, I guess, creates a baseline for what is out there today. And so that would be a measurable point of which activity from this point forward would occur and how that changed the environmental results in the future.
I don't believe there's anything really unusual about this. We've done trails before. It's pretty much the same type of thing we found on the Prairie Trail and some of the other trails on the railroad right-of-ways. Nothing jumped up and said, boy, this is really polluted. It's typical railroad right-of-way in this area.
Tony, we need action on this, is that correct?
We need a motion to authorizing Denny to sign the supplement.
And once we sign it, if we sign it tonight, we still have 60 days?
Actually, if we sign it tonight, the railroad does not plan to sign until January 8th, and then we have 50 days beyond January 8th to back out the deal.
Well, and just for Denny and I discussed this beforehand, and I'm going to get confirmation on that. Gridley did confirm that for us, but I think we want that confirmation from the railroad too, that the due diligence period will start upon their execution on the 8th.
Okay, I move that we accept the environmental supplement to the Burlington Northern Real Estate purchase and sale agreement.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to authorize execution of the supplemental real estate purchase and sale agreement, supplement 2. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will execute that.
Two other issues, Mr. Chairman, just an update on the Four Corner project. Mr. Patrick and I can share with the board that the process is moving forward. A public open house was held on December 4th, which was well attended. A lot of input was shared. A lot of dialogue occurred. The planning team has taken that input back, and they plan to have another public open house probably the first week of February with kind of winnowed down concepts and strategies based on the public's input. Trying to, they start at the top of the funnel, they're getting down into the bottom with a couple preferred alternatives that they'll bring forward for further public input as they work to get a master plan crafted for City Council's approval, probably late spring, mid to late spring.
I will add that it's been really interesting. The original charge for Parks and Rec was the BLM to make a plan to satisfy them as to what the future intended use and plan of using this BLM property was. Well, we spent the majority of our time and resources on non-BLM land south from kind of the Paul Bunyan to Independence Point. So this last meeting that we had, we kind of reversed things and started out up in Riverstone and work south instead of starting at Independence Point and working north. So we were able to address the stuff that we originally were intended they're charged to do. But it makes sense, too, to make sure that we are addressing the whole lineal aspect of it rather than just the middle section of it, because there's certain things that need to happen, like the big issue was Mullen. Do you close Mullen? Do you neck it down or slow it down? Do you make it event or emergency use only, which triggers the discussion on Garden Avenue? Do you put access off of Garden into the Fort grounds? So all of those things, with the tremendous feedback they've gotten through the open house and the website responses, have helped them formulate, you got to do this before you can do that, and here everything fits a little bit better if you do these things in this fashion. So it's been very informative, but we've also made Jana from the BLM a little happier, because we spent a lot of time talking about her part of the deal instead of the stuff she's not involved with. So it's been very, very interesting.
And then finally, just an update on the 720 Sherman Avenue property. We have a closing scheduled for this Friday. Danielle's been very, very helpful in getting the documentation together, so everything looks on track for us to close on this on Friday and have that property divested. And that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Tony. Board Commissioner comments. Any comments just to general from the board? Seeing none, public comment. Greg?
Are you going to collect
Welcome.
the disclosure report?
If you could just give us your name and address for the folks on.
Greg Johnson. I'm representing the Midtown Neighbors Association. We had a round table with the board, LCDC board, city council, and that was a week or so ago, so we thank you for all being there. I guess what we take away from that is there was the word compromise floated out there, and we're still interested in what that's going to be, and how we can work on that. I guess just a little bit frustrated on not showing up in the board meeting minutes, or even in the minutes of this roundtable, that there was even a neighborhood association that was represented there. So I don't know. Maybe that's
Your comments were there, but you didn't see the name of the association.
Yeah, it's just details. I mean, I guess we're just sensitive. We've obviously put a lot of work on this and trying to get the right fit for the neighborhood. So, with that, we're looking at, again, we're thinking that there was going to be a presentation from the housing company, and it is not, because of, I guess there's just some paperwork and some details of financial and all that. So we'll come up to see what they have to propose this time around when they propose it. But with that, there was a lot of things that were mentioned at the round table, and one was selling the property. Was that a viable? And I'm just throwing it out there. It was things that were said, and we've been told that anyone could go in there and do anything they wanted to, and with the stalemate that we have with this project, it seems to be a better option for quite a few of the neighbors that I've talked to move on to something different. But before you guys sign off on this and give the approval for the housing company going any further, there's still 2 market studies out there that haven't come to a conclusion of that we need more of this workforce housing. Also, the financials of how all this is going to work is still a little murky. Not a little, it's a lot murky of how this is all going to pan out. And then there's always the design and the stress on the surfaces in the area, and we still don't know what that is all about. again, with that, I mean, there was a meeting or two ago where Mrs. Goodlander had voiced her opinion on the board. I think her words were "put up or shut up" on the support of the housing company that LCDC needed to be there and not be there. And again, I stress before we do that, we need some more information out there to educate our neighbors and our city. We do have a few other thoughts on compromise and negotiation of what could work best here. But as I listened to Mr. Graves and talking about image and what you guys do and all that, we have never thought that LCDC should back out of this. We've always felt that we should be able to work with you because you are bringing our city to a better deal, a better vibe for the city and our tax dollars. And I couldn't think of a better project to start over with for the city, the community, the neighbors, and your image of what you guys do. I would be the first to stand up on stage and say, hey, we had this, and now we're working toward this, and they truly are there for us as a community and as an organization to further the city and into the right fit for our neighborhood. So again, I'm here to continue to work and compromise and move forward. I think, this is my personal thought, I think this is a golden opportunity for LCDC to be heard in a different way, working with us. I think we're good for you. I think this project could be good for you. I'm not going to, pretend that I think this is a fine opportunity for something to happen here in a very positive way and not have this friction. So that was my 2 minutes.
Okay.
Deal.
Can you answer a question?
Greg, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I know we've kind of talked about this before, and I guess I feel like I'm asking the same question every time. You keep saying you don't like this project,
correct,
but you like some other project.
Mm-hmm.
What is the other project? What can you give just a guideline, a framework?
I think we've mentioned that a few times of when this project was first put on the board 8 years ago. It was owner occupied. Condominiums, retail, businesses, and as things changed, as properties were purchased, as this went along, it didn't seem to fit the dynamics of what you've paid for it and what it needed to be to pencil out with the overlays and with the economic turn that we had in 2008, and now we're stuck with all these pairs of shoes that have been bought, and they're all ill-fitting. And now we only have one player that's willing to wear one of the pair of the shoes is the housing company, and we're stuck with this. I don't know. Owner-occupied would sit this neighborhood so much better than having another 38 units of rental units when we are already 59% rental units in that neighborhood. So I am not here to drum up and draw out the perfect plan. We have given representation of buildings and of layouts that we thought would work, that work in Sandpoint, that work in other communities. That's where we're looking for you for some help, other than being stuck with the housing company's idea. That's what we are not happy with. It seems like that's the only player, and we've thrown up our hands, and that's where we're at. I think we can do better. I think you guys can do better. I think we can do better, and that Midtown can be so much better. Again, I can't stress on how much private money has been sunk into that neighborhood with the people that have bought buildings, that have upgraded them, that have plunked their business down there, that have put their families down there, and this just seems like it's going to throw it off track. It's just a gut feeling. I'm sorry. I've just, and when you said and you asked for what do we have to do to liquidate the property and get out, I was offended by that. I thought that was not the response I was hoping from you or the board of selling and going.
I guess at this point in time, we have to look at all of our options. I mean,
Sure you do.
If there's somebody else out there that can do a project better than we can.
I wish there was a proper price on the property that someone could do it, but there is so much pride and politics and ego and money spent on studies and drawings that everyone wants their nickel, and we're stuck with that nickel. We're stuck with that result at the end. Why is that my fault? Why? I don't understand that. I don't understand why we're stuck with that. That somewhere down the line, it went off track. And this is what we're stuck with. That's what it feels like,
the other
sir.
thing, too, is the housing company does have a financial stake
Yes,
in
they
the
do.
property also. So it's not just our choice.
I
They've already
understand that.
made the
They own
financial-
one of the pair of the ill-fitting shoes, and that's they bought it. I didn't. I mean, they dove into this and didn't research it out before they bought it.
So once again, if we go back to that concept, if you're going to have somebody else come in
Mm-hmm.
and do a different project, there has to be a transfer of ownership here, because the housing company is probably not going to be a partner in a different
Correct.
project.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's why we were looking at those kind of concepts at the round table the other day.
I think it's a fine option. You have a neighborhood that has over 150 signatures of businesses and residents that are eager for something different than the project that's been proposed. We have talked to our state representatives. We're looking for help on what we should do and ask and push forward. We will ramp up the petition again if we have to be heard. But how much more noise do we need to make to say, can we look at some other viable options and not wait for the housing company to put a different spin on this thing? It still is what it is, and it doesn't fit. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Welcome.
It's nice to see you all again. My name is Amy Lyons, and I live in Midtown. I think that the LCDC has an excellent website, and I'm particularly interested in the part that says you all perceive one of your primary responsibilities to be community education. I'm a member of the community, and I believe I'm a stakeholder. And I have been frustrated in my attempts to become educated about this project. And my concern is that the LCDC could be about to hastily embark on something that would result in a real blemish and distract attention from all of the good work that you've already done. It seems to me that there's two components to what's happening here, and one of them is fiscal, and that's the use of those low-income housing tax credits to finance the project. And then the other one is policy. And I don't know if there's been enough education of the board on these two issues. Now, it would seem to me that given how serious your mandate is, that the board commissioners would want to have much more information before they go ahead. I don't know if it's a lack of information or a lack of candor. But in all of the representations about this project, no one has ever alluded to the fact that this can only be low-income, rent-restricted rental housing. The idea that it could ever be condos is a fantasy. Here's another problem. It has never been made clear that Idaho Housing and Finance and the housing company are interchangeable. They are the same thing. And they are quasi-governmental agencies. It's interesting to me that Idaho Housing has regulatory power. They may have rulemaking authority. Low-income housing tax credit projects are awarded on an allocation basis. I've asked repeatedly for information, detailed information about that, and it is alarming to me that at the very beginning, when the housing company files its application for those credits, it makes irrevocable commitments, not for the 10 years that are always discussed. 10 years doesn't sound like a long time. 10 years of tax credits, and that rewards the developer. And it's true. The developer is rewarded at the beginning with the 10 years of tax credits. But here's the thing. That is in return for a minimum 30-year irrevocable commitment to continue to run the project as low-income, rent-restricted housing. The more points, the more likely the housing company is to be awarded the contract. And since the housing company is in the same physical space as Idaho Housing, my picture of that application being submitted is the Idaho Housing person going around the corner and dropping it off, or the housing company giving it to Idaho Housing. Idaho Housing administers Section 8, rental assistance for HUD. Idaho Housing administers the low-income housing tax credit program. So there is no suspense here. I am quite certain that they will get the 70 points they need on the application. And to make sure that that happens, and I've written to you all about this, and I've heard nothing from any one of you. And that is because I cannot communicate with you directly. You've involved a public relations firm, but a member of the public who wants to discuss factual issues with you can't contact you directly. And that's very frustrating. The more points, the more likely you are to prevail on the application. And where do they come from? Longer commitments, minimum 30 years. I'm sure that you know that, Commissioner Colwell. But in order to get more points and have a better chance of getting that reward, some developers will go for longer periods, 30 to 40. Now, Lcdc, the Lake District, it's going to sunset in just 7 years. That means if that project was built today, it would still be in the middle of that 10-year period, but Lcdc will be gone. As to the housing company being around to manage the company and do different things, to manage the project, pardon me, again, that could be deceptive because the housing company is only responsible to monitor compliance with those low-income, restricted rental requirements. If it finds a problem with the project, its only responsibility is to report it. You know, this shows you how the policy intersects with the technicalities. It's a very technical program. It can only be done in one way. But here's the thing. All of the commitments are made up front. And the agreements are made into a document which is then recorded. And it does bind. Who does it bind? Is the board aware of the fact that the market for these credits almost collapsed in 2008? Is the board aware of the fact that it's never completely recovered? Is the board aware of the fact that there is controversy about whether or not this is the best way to achieve something that we all agree is a wonderful aspiration? You know, it's been said that this program is nothing more than soft capital given out by government. That is not the impression that we have received from the housing company. We've been led to believe that they're somehow independent when actually they're just an arm of a government agency. A government agency that works for HUD. So it's an agent of the federal government. Is the board aware of the fact that there are people who really study this stuff and understand it, that think that the combination of these tax credits and the housing choice vouchers reinforce existing poverty? Is that what we want? Can we just rely on what the housing company has told us so far as we move forward? The housing company has not been at all candid about Section 8. There's project-based Section 8, and then there's tenant-based Section 8. But Section 8 is very much alive and well. Another interesting thing is that this is a tax mechanism. They're governed by the Internal Revenue Code. It requires the involvement of specialists, tax lawyers, tax accountants. It's an industry. It's an industry that has conventions. It's a product. But this is my neighborhood. And at the end of the 10 years, then they're on the hook for another 20 to 30. And the interesting thing is, as I said, the housing company won't have any responsibilities other than to monitor and report. But just as everyone who's responsible for putting this thing in place walks away, the redevelopment district won't be here. You all won't be here. Some of you perhaps will have moved on to other positions. Just at that moment, whatever the housing company builds is going to begin to depreciate, it's going to begin to deteriorate, because that's what housing stock does. And it isn't anybody's fault. I'm not even going to go into the fact that the housing company never, ever has built in Idaho new commercial space. And I'm not going to get into the fact that they have zero obligations to do anything with that commercial space. Their sole obligation is to monitor compliance. And when it gets to be year 15, guess what? All kinds of deleterious things can happen. There's apparently quite a bit has been studied about what happens in year 15, what happens when the developer who has benefited from the tax credits is off the hook. This is such a big problem that HUD has a publication that has a chapter called Intervening When Things Go Wrong. And one of the things that can happen when things go wrong is that the whole shooting match is sold back to the government for what is called in the law a bargain price. So that 30 years from now, will we all have gone around in a circle? Will Coeur d'Alene join the list of cities across the country that have acted hastily in this area and live to regret it? Cincinnati, San Diego, Hartford, Las Vegas. There's been a great deal of discussion about this notion that the neighbors haven't been able to come up with another developer. Well, here's the thing. When you zone and put in these overlay districts and do all of these requirements, it becomes impossible for private developers to do anything. So I think it's extremely unfair and mean-spirited to be antagonistic toward the neighbors because they couldn't find a developer, when there's so many encumbrances right now to developing this, including the housing companies arbitrarily pricing the thing, that a private developer can't come in. And, as Greg said, how can that possibly be our fault? This whole issue of tax credits, there's very few institutions apparently, because it's so complicated and because it's the IRS code, that can even participate in this. And nobody said a word about who the developer will be, how these credits will be marketed. These aren't my words. These are the words of people who study this stuff. It's complex. It's risky. I would imagine that it might be worthwhile to take the time for the board to find out much more. And also, there was apparently a very successful and wonderful workshop for the Four Corners. The Midtown neighbors got a hastily called, no notice, no due process summons, where the neighbor's representative was basically cross-examined and questions were answered, I'll just say, not candidly. I think it would be beneficial to have representation from the neighbors. I think it would be appropriate for Mr. Johnson to really have a seat at the table as opposed to what happened. And I do feel I should let you know that I have reached out to public interest lawyers because I'm very concerned about this. And it's been difficult, if not impossible, for me to get any response other than the single sentence, "Thank you for your email. Thank you for your email. Thank you for your email." And I thank you all for your time today.
Okay, any other public comment? Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Joe Corcio. I live at 730 East Pine Ave, just down the road here. First off, as a CPA and an ex-auditor, it's nice to hear that you have a clean audit report. That's a very good sign. I've also would have to say that I commend you folks on hiring the people that you hired this evening, or who reported this evening on the public awareness and your efforts to reach out and become a more proactive agency. And I don't know if this is the right time for this. These two folks before me had some very good input on a project going on. I was told that there may be a project being developed just down the road here, and this kind of ties into this communication thing, not more than a couple hundred yards. And I only heard about it from a neighbor. So I don't know if this is the proper time to bring that up. I don't know if you're taking input on that project at all, or.
Sure. You're welcome to, yeah. We've had a couple of other neighbors in at our last meeting. So. Okay,
yes, and then they told me that there was going to be a follow-up meeting, so here I am. I guess I would like a status on that, like where is that? What is it? I've heard it's a tech center. I don't know how accurate that is, and I guess I'm curious as to why what I would consider a commercial industry or industry at all would be placed in what I consider a residential center. I'm concerned about my property values. I'm concerned about traffic. I'm concerned about, loitering, things of that nature. So I'm just looking for an update, and I guess it kind of ties back to this whole communication thing that, if I'm literally 300 yards from where I sit right now, and this project is between where I sit and my home, why did I have to hear about it from a neighbor? Why wasn't there some type of public outreach? I believe the lady before me just addressed that of, making the immediate public more aware of the ongoings in their neighborhood.
Okay, well, I will attempt to respond as best I can. It's not an initiative necessarily of our agency. I think we've been approached by some folks that would like to utilize some property that we do own south of the parking lot here. I think that a few months ago we were shared with some information regarding a possible sort of a tech, wasn't really an incubator program, but something innovation, a technology innovation, entrepreneurship kind of a center. So that's kind of where it is with us. We're at the receiving end because we own some property that people are looking at that they'd like to utilize.
Sure, understood.
In terms of the commercial versus the residential, my understanding that with the current zoning would have to change on that likely. So there would be a process through the city before that could even be done. So at this point, we don't have anything concrete from any proponents. There've been a couple of articles in the paper, I believe. So we don't have a lot. You could go back to, Tony, do you recall what meeting that was?
It's several months ago. You can look at our videos on our website and watch the videos, but I can't remember when they came and presented their concept and idea.
I want to say late summer,
the
summer meeting.
Yeah, and I have to, apologize for my own ignorance,
right.
but I think one of the gentlemen here mentioned about, people are just busy, and unless it happens in your neighborhood, you're not going to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So, I don't read the newspaper. I barely get a chance to look at watch the news. So I'm not saying you haven't done any publication at all. It's just that, if it is for my 2 cents, with this public awareness initiative that you're undertaking, that, more immediate reaching out to the community. I understand you own property there, and I am pro-development, smart development, so I'm not opposed to, something being done over there. I think there's some improvements can be done there. So I'm looking forward to what eventually does go there. It's just, I'm just hoping it fits the community more than a tech center. So.
Okay. Appreciate your appearing. I would encourage you to maybe contact the folks that are proposing it.
Okay.
And I think I could say, honestly, there's nothing about to happen very fast.
Fair enough.
But stay vigilant, and we'll try to be communicative. Certainly, if it shows up on our agenda, we do publish our agendas,
right.
both posted and on our website.
Okay. Fair enough.
So,
thank you all. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming down tonight. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Justin and I want to get at it.